coin appeared without warning. Polly Ames had been setting the last stack of high-value chips along the edge of the private table when she noticed it. A small silver medallion hanging on a thin chain against the stranger's chest, partially visible where his collar had shifted. Her hands stopped mid-motion. The design was unmistakable. A compass rose with a needle deliberately bent at a sharp angle, like the craftsman had wanted the imperfection there. She had last seen that image in a cardboard box in her closet. Sitting next to a folded flag and a commendation letter, she had never been able to read past the first paragraph. Miss. One of the two men flanking the table stepped forward. He was big enough to make most people reconsider whatever they'd been about to do. You're staring. Polly reset her expression. She was good at that. Years of working the back rooms of the Aldgate Club had taught her to wear her face like a mask when necessary. She was the head cashier and bookkeeper, which meant she was supposed to be invisible. And she had always worked hard at that invisibility, harder than most people knew. She finished placing the chips. I apologize. I'll finish and step out. What are you staring at? The voice came from the man at the table, not loud, not sharp, just the kind of quiet that expected to be answered. Kellen Thorne had not moved. He sat exactly as he had when she'd entered, one hand flat on the green felt, the other resting at his knee. He was watching her with the particular kind of attention that most people in his orbit spent considerable effort avoiding. She had worked at the Aldgate long enough to understand what his name meant. Men like Kellen Thorne had reservations the manager confirmed without being asked twice, and staff members who made eye contact by accident tended to find reasons to look somewhere else. She had never spoken directly to any of them. I'm sorry, she said again. I thought I recognized something. What something? The bodyguard shifted. Polly looked at Kellen instead of at him. She was not sure why. Something about his stillness made panic seem unnecessary. That, she lifted her chin toward the medallion, that coin. Kellen's eyes dropped briefly to his chest, then returned to her. Whatever expression she expected, irritation, dismissal, the faintly contemptuous look certain men gave staff who overstepped. She did not get it. He simply looked at her, thinking. Everyone out, he said. Polly thought that included her. She began gathering the chip tray. Not you. The guards exchanged a glance. Sylvester Ford, the club manager, who had been hovering near the doorway since Kellen arrived, opened his mouth. Kellen didn't look at him. Ford closed his mouth and left with the others. The room went very quiet. Polly kept the tray in her hands because setting it down felt too permanent. Tell me what you think you recognized, Kellen said. She could have invented something. She was good at numbers, but she had always been decent at reading situations too, and this one read as a moment she could still exit cleanly if she chose her words carefully. She chose the truth instead. My brother had one exactly like it. She watched his face. The compass rose with the bent needle. He kept it in his left jacket pocket. He said there were only 2 of them ever made. Kellen did not answer immediately. He turned the medallion between his fingers once, just the one rotation, and let it rest against his shirt. His expression had not changed, but his breathing had. Your brother's name, he said. Lyle Ames. The name registered. Polly saw it happen, not dramatically, because Kellen Thorne was not a man who performed his reactions. But his jaw tightened by a degree, the way a door closes when the weather changes. Barely perceptible and completely certain. He was a police detective, she said. Not a question. The recognition in his face had confirmed more than she'd expected, and she was already too far into the current to swim sideways. He died 12 years ago, on duty. Kellen did not apologize. He did not call her brother a hero or search for the correct condolence. He looked at the medallion. Sit down, he said. I'm working. Something moved in his expression that might, in different lighting, have resembled acknowledgement, then stand. "But don't leave." She stood. He asked her questions the way a person does when they already know some of the answers, and are trying to locate the edges of what they don't. What precinct had Lyle worked? How long? Did he have a partner? Had he ever mentioned a night in October, 12 years back, near the Port District warehouses? Polly's hands tightened on the chip tray. He never talked much about his cases, she said, but he came home one night smelling like smoke and motor oil, and he didn't speak through dinner. My mother asked him 3 times if he was all right. She paused. He said yes. That was always his answer. Kellen was quiet for a moment. Then, "Did he tell you about the coin?" "He showed me once. He said he'd had 2 made a few years earlier. He'd meant one for his old partner, guy who retired to Montana. Never got around to mailing it." She shifted the tray, said he found a better reason to give the second one away. "Did he say what the engraving meant? Inside the back?" Polly went still. She had never mentioned an engraving, not once. She had known it was there. She had looked at Lyle's coin 100 times in the years after he died, but she had said nothing about it to this stranger. "How do you know about the engraving?" she asked. Kellen did not answer. Instead, he unclasped the chain and set the medallion flat on the felt between them, face down. In the low gold light of the private room, the text inside the back was faint but readable. 4 words in small stamped letters. "Don't stop. Keep moving." Polly's throat tightened. Those were the exact same 4 words. She had them memorized, the same way she had memorized the sound of Lyle's laugh and the particular way he took his coffee, and the fact that he always checked the lock twice before bed. "Who are you?" she asked. Kellen picked the coin back up. He held it a long moment before he answered. "Someone your brother pulled out of a burning car," he said, 12 years ago. Someone who has been trying to find out his name ever since. The October night Kellen was describing had not been a good one for him. He'd been 28 then. Not yet untouchable. Not yet the kind of man whose name cleared hallways. He had been ambitious and reckless in the particular combination that tends to get people killed, and on that October night, a rival crew had made a serious attempt to do exactly that. They had run his car off the road, 2 blocks from the Port District warehouses, set it on fire, and left. The car had been burning from the front end by the time Lyle Ames happened to pass. Lyle was off duty, in plain clothes, and he should by any reasonable logic have called it in and waited. He did not. He broke the driver's side window with a river stone from the drainage ditch, reached into a burning vehicle, and dragged a man he did not know into the cold, wet air. Kellen remembered very little of the next few minutes. He remembered cold gravel against his face. He remembered coughing until his ribs ached. He remembered a voice, low and level, saying, "Stay down. You're going to be all right." He also remembered the sound of a second explosion from somewhere down the road, and Lyle's head turning toward it immediately. There was someone else down there, another car, maybe another survivor. Lyle had pressed the medallion into Kellen's palm before Kellen could speak. "Keep this," he said. "Don't stop. Keep moving. It means something." And then he ran toward the second fire. He did not come back. The official report would later say that Detective Lyle Ames of the 9th District had been struck by debris from the secondary explosion while attempting to extract a civilian from a second vehicle. He had been killed instantly. He had been 34 years old. He received a commendation posthumously, which Polly had never been able to read past the first paragraph. Kellen had not known his name. He had not known anything except a face, an October night, and 4 words stamped inside a silver coin. He had spent the following years trying to trace the off-duty detective who'd pulled him from a burning car, and found every time that the records were incomplete, the witnesses scattered, the department reluctant to discuss a closed case with someone like him. He had hired investigators. He had quietly contacted retired officers. Every trail ended somewhere other than where he needed it to go. He had never stopped looking. Polly had lowered herself into the chair opposite him before she fully registered that she'd done it. The chip tray sat on the table between them, like an absurd reminder that she was supposed to be working. "He went back for someone else," she said. "Yes. He always did that." Her voice didn't break. She had spent 12 years learning to carry this, and she was not going to crack it open in front of a stranger, no matter what he had just told her. That was his particular problem. Kellen looked at her carefully. "You don't have to minimize it." "I'm not minimizing it. I'm just..." She pressed her lips together. "He was the most stubborn person I ever knew. He would have told you that going back was the obvious thing to do." She looked at the medallion. "He would have been annoyed that you've been carrying that around for 12 years, feeling guilty about it." Kellen was quiet. "You are feeling guilty about it," she said. "He died because he was in that area," Kellen said. "If he hadn't stopped, he would have stopped anyway, for anyone." She met his eyes steadily. "That's not something you caused. That's who he was." A breath. "And if you've spent 12 years treating that coin like a debt, then you've misunderstood what he handed you." Kellen Thorne was not accustomed to being corrected. The quality of his silence in those moments was something his associates had learned to recognize as a warning sign. He sat with it now, and Polly waited, and the silence between them was strange. Not hostile, but dense, like air before a storm. "What was he like?" Kellen asked finally. The question surprised her, not because it was wrong, but because it was the right one, which she hadn't expected. She told him. She told him about Lyle's terrible sense of direction, and his excellent chili, and the fact that he'd once tried to teach their mother to play chess, and abandoned the project after 30 minutes, because she kept trying to negotiate the rules. She told him that Lyle had coached a youth basketball team on Saturday mornings, and had never once mentioned it at home. And she had only found out at the funeral when 3 of his former players showed up still in their jerseys. Kellen listened, not politely. He listened the way people do when they are filing something away carefully. "Don't stop. Keep moving," he said when she had finished. He said it before he ran. I assumed it was something he said to everyone. "He said it to me the morning before my bookkeeping exam." She almost smiled. "He said it every time something hard was in front of me. He said it was the only advice he actually trusted." Kellen turned the coin once in his fingers and set it back down. "I want to find the rest of what happened that night," he said. "The official report is incomplete. I know there's more." Polly looked at him. Something about the directness of the statement. Not a request, not a performance of generosity, just a plain declaration, made it easier to answer honestly. "So do I," she said. She should have expected what came next. She had worked at the Aldgate long enough to understand that doing unexpected things in front of powerful men had consequences. Sylvester Ford summoned her the following morning. His office smelled like leather conditioner and insecurity. He sat behind his desk with his hands folded and the look of a man who had decided something before the meeting began. Claudia Nairn, the club's membership director, a woman who had always regarded Polly the way certain people regard furniture they consider mismatched for the room, was already seated to his left. Polly stood. She knew better than to sit until invited, and she suspected she would not be invited. "You spent 40 minutes alone in the private suite with a member," Ford said. "He asked me to stay." "He asked you to stay." Ford made the repetition sound like a diagnosis. "You understand how that appears." "I understand how you've decided it appears," Polly said. "Those aren't the same thing." Claudia tilted her head with the patience of someone watching a slow process conclude. You told him about a dead family member. He asked about the coin he was wearing. I recognized it. Convenient. Polly looked at her. My brother died in the line of duty 12 years ago. I don't use that to be convenient. Ford placed a folder on the desk. We have no documentation connecting your brother to any member of this club. Your claim is unverifiable. In the meantime, a staff member who claims a personal connection to a high-value member, especially this member, creates a liability. The word landed with its full weight. You're suspending me, Polly said. Pending review. Ford's voice had acquired the texture of someone who found this regrettable and was not particularly regretful. Your access card will be deactivated. You may collect your personal belongings from the staff room. She collected her things slowly. Ford was the type who wanted her to hurry, and she was the type who didn't give that to people. She was buttoning her coat in the corridor when she heard Kellen Thorne's voice behind her. What exactly did she do wrong? He was standing near the service entrance. Ford was beside him suddenly, posture entirely transformed. The man who had just suspended her had become someone very carefully deciding how to breathe. Mr. Thorne, this is an internal personnel matter. It involves me. Kellen's eyes moved to Polly. He suspended you. Yes. I'll fix it. Don't. The word came out quickly enough that he stopped. She stepped toward him. If you make one call and this disappears, it proves nothing. It just proves I have access to someone with influence, which is exactly what they're accusing me of. She held his gaze. I want them to admit they were wrong, because the truth says so, not because they're afraid of you. Kellen was quiet for 3 full seconds. Then he put his phone back in his pocket. Ford looked relieved. He should not have. The police archives on the Port District incident were not fully digitized. Kellen's investigator, a quiet man named Philip Acre, who photographed everything and spoke only when directly addressed, confirmed this within the first 24 hours. Polly drove to the city records office herself the following morning and requested the physical files. They were in bankers' boxes in a basement room that smelled of damp cardboard and decades. She and Philip spent 4 hours going through paper. Polly found the incident dispatch log at the bottom of the second box. Responding unit, off-duty det, L. Ames, 9th District. Assisted extraction of 1 adult male from Vehicle 1, returned to scene for secondary extraction attempt. Fatally injured in secondary vehicle explosion. Victim of secondary vehicle survived with minor injuries. She sat with that for a moment. Lyle had succeeded. The person in the second car had lived. The photograph came from a different box. Crime scene documentation, taken about 40 minutes after the incident. It showed the roadside in flat grey light, the 2 burned vehicles, emergency personnel, and a cluster of civilians at the frame's edge. One of them was a man on his knees in the gravel, an emergency blanket across his shoulders, something small held in both hands. Next to him, kneeling for what must have been only a moment before returning to the scene, was Lyle Ames. Lyle was looking at the man, not at the camera, not at the vehicles, at him. Polly touched the edge of the photograph. She let Philip photograph it instead of taking it herself. The last piece came from a retired officer named Bernard Salis, 26 years on the force, 8 of them at the 9th District, overlapping with Lyle's time there. He agreed to meet them at a diner in Evanston. He was 71 and completely alert, and when Kellen set the medallion on the table between them, Salis went quiet for a full minute. I know that, he said. Tell me, Kellen said. Salis told him. He remembered Lyle having 2 of the coins made. He'd thought it was sentimental nonsense at the time, had said so, and Lyle had smiled the way he smiled when he disagreed and wasn't going to argue about it. He remembered the night of the Port District incident. He had been one of the officers who arrived afterward and found Lyle's body. He remembered very clearly a young man in a singed jacket sitting on the road shoulder, holding something small, refusing to release it when the paramedics tried to help him. "He gave it to you," Salas said, looking at Kellen. "Not a question." "Before he went back," Kellen said. Salas nodded once. He looked at Polly. "He was a good man. I mean that in the way you should. Not as something people say at funerals, but as something that was actually true." Polly thanked him. She managed to get the words out whole. The Aldgate Club's executive committee met in the same private suite, where the poker table still held the rectangular impressions from Polly's chip stacks. Ford attended. So did Claudia. Polly stood at one end of the table and did not look at either of them. Kellen placed the documents in the center. The dispatch log, the photograph, Bernard Salas's signed statement, then the medallion beside them. Sylvester Ford told this committee that Polly Ames fabricated a connection between her deceased brother and a member of this club. Kellen said. His voice never changed in volume. It didn't need to. The dispatch log confirms Lyle Ames was present at the incident. The photograph confirms he was in contact with a survivor. Salas confirms witnessing that survivor in possession of this coin immediately after the rescue. He paused. Polly Ames did not approach me. She noticed the coin while doing her job. When I asked her to stay, she stayed. When I offered to intervene after her suspension, she refused. He looked at Ford without heat, which was somehow worse than anger. She asked instead that the truth be established. So, here it is. The silence in the room was the particular kind that comes when everyone understands. The conclusion was reached some time ago, and the conversation now is only paperwork. Ford's apology, when it came, was technically complete and emotionally hollow. Polly let him finish. "I accept the correction," she said. "An apology in this room means something when the people who heard the original accusation hear the correction too." Claudia looked away. Outside in the corridor, Kellen walked beside Polly without comment for a moment. "Then, you didn't enjoy that?" "I enjoyed the truth being in the room. I didn't enjoy needing it." He considered this. There's a difference. There always is. He called her 3 weeks later, not about the club, not about Lyle. He had been looking at programs for families of officers killed in the line of duty, he said, and found them inconsistent in ways that bothered him. He wanted to fund something real and continuous. He had a blank page and a question. "What would have helped your family?" he asked. She told him honestly. She told him about the year after Lyle died, when her mother couldn't work and the department's survivor benefit ran out faster than expected. About her own interrupted college enrollment. About the counselor her mother had needed and couldn't afford, and the one her younger cousin had eventually needed even more. She told him it wasn't the big things that crushed people. It was the accumulated medium things, month after month, with no floor under them. Kellen wrote down everything she said. When she suggested the name, Lyle would have hated being a foundation logo. She told him, quietly but firmly. He asked what it should be called instead. "Something that tells the truth about what it does," she said. "It catches people. That's what it does. It catches them when the floor goes." They called it the floor. 3 words on the letterhead. "We catch you." Polly became its program director. Not because Kellen offered it to her, but because she built the position before either of them had a name for what she was doing. She sat across from a widow in Bridgeport at 9 in the morning with a yellow legal pad and asked what she needed, wrote it down, then went back to her desk and figured out how to get it. Kellen funded it. He also showed up to meetings he wasn't required to attend. He read applications in the evenings and left small handwritten notes in the margins, which Polly initially found unexpected and later simply found accurate. When a teenage boy whose father had been killed on duty wrote in his application that he wanted to study architecture, because his father had always pointed out buildings on their drives together. Kellen read that sentence twice and approved the application without being asked. Polly noticed. She said nothing. She moved the next file closer to him. Their relationship shifted the way relationships do when no one announces it, but both people know it has happened. Coffee, after long evenings, became a routine. Phone calls that began with case files ended an hour later with no remaining business reason. He remembered without being told that she couldn't eat green peppers. She remembered without being told that he slept poorly and worked better in the late afternoon. She also knew who Kellen Thorne was beyond the Foundation office. She had worked close enough to that world long enough not to be naive about it. He was not a clean man. He operated by a code that had required decisions she would not have made. Consequences she tried not to examine too directly. She held that knowledge carefully, the way you hold something with an edge. But she also saw him apologize to a secretary he'd spoken to curtly during a bad week. She saw him take a call from a young man who'd aged out of their intake program and just needed someone to talk to, and stay on the phone for 40 minutes, though he had 3 missed meetings. She saw him stand in front of Lyle's photograph on the memorial wall, among a dozen others, because Polly had insisted it not be Lyle alone, and look at it with the particular steadiness of a man who had converted grief into something he could carry without putting down. One evening in November, after the last staff member had gone, and it was just the two of them in the reception area going through grant applications, she set down her folder. "I need to ask you something." Kellen waited. "Are you here because of Lyle?" She gestured between them, not meaning the Foundation specifically, but everything, all of it. "Is this his story or ours?" Kellen did not answer immediately. She had learned to wait for him. Immediate answers from him tended to be tactical. Delayed ones tended to be true. "Both," he said, "and then only ours." She looked at him. "He brought me to you," Kellen said. "That's true, and I won't pretend otherwise." He set his own folder down. "But Lyle Ames is not the reason I know which argument will actually change your mind versus which one just makes you go quiet. And they look identical until you know the difference. He's not the reason I know that when you say you're fine, the only reliable tell is whether your hands are still or not." A pause. "He's not the reason I have been very carefully making sure not to give you any reason to leave." Polly sat with that. "That last part," she said, "I noticed." "I know you noticed. You could have just said something. I was afraid you'd tell me I'd misread the situation." She almost laughed. Kellen Thorne was afraid of something. Evidently. She stood up and crossed the room and stopped in front of him. His face, the controlled, careful expression he wore everywhere, which she had learned to read the same way she read ledgers, where the important numbers were always in the lines between the obvious ones, looked back at her. "I love you," she said. "I didn't plan it. I don't think it required your permission." She paused. "But there it is." He exhaled, not dramatically. It was the sound of something held a long time being set down. "I know," he said, "because it's the same." He reached for her hand. She let him take it. The room was completely ordinary. Industrial carpet, folding chairs, a coffee maker that needed descaling, and none of that mattered at all. The floor's first annual ceremony was held on a Friday evening in March. The reception hall held 40 families. Every officer on the memorial wall had at least one person in the room who had loved them. Polly stood beside Kellen near the back while the first scholarship letters were read aloud. A 16-year-old girl whose father had been killed when she was 4 accepted an envelope confirming 4 years of university tuition. She cried. Her mother held her. The room went quiet the way rooms do when something true is happening. Afterward, when the crowd moved toward the reception tables, Kellen walked to the memorial wall alone. Polly watched him stop in front of Lyle's photograph. He reached into his jacket and removed the chain. He held the coin a moment. The compass rose, the bent needle, 12 years of carried weight, and then set it carefully on the small shelf below Lyle's photograph. Beside it, he placed the second coin, the one Polly had brought from the cardboard box in her closet, the one that had rested next to a folded flag for 12 years. For the first time since that October night on the Port District Road, the two coins rested together. Polly came to stand beside him. "He told you not to stop," she said. "He did." She looked at her brother's photograph. Lyle Ames, 34 years old, slightly sunburned, slightly exasperated by whoever was taking the picture, entirely himself. "He didn't save you so you'd spend 12 years owing him," she said. "He saved you so there'd be a life afterward." Kellen looked at the coins, then he turned to her. "This is the afterward," he said. Behind them, someone in the room began to applaud. Then another person. Then the sound spread the way warmth does, not suddenly, but completely, until there was no corner of the room it hadn't reached. Polly leaned against Kellen's side. He put his arm around her. Neither of them spoke, because the room was speaking for them in the only language that mattered. The sound of people who had been caught before they hit the floor, standing on their feet. 12 years earlier, a detective had knelt on a gravel road in October dark and pressed a small silver coin into a stranger's hand. He could not have known where it would lead. He could not have known about the foundation or the scholarships, or the woman who would one day love the man he'd saved. He could not have known that his particular stubbornness, the kind that turns toward the second fire instead of away from it, would eventually build something that outlasted the night. He had only known one thing, the same thing he always knew. Don't stop, keep moving. And because he had lived by it, so would they.